Now, throughout this entire CASP live lesson, we're going to be working off of a real-world scenario, a real-world case study, and we are the Brio Insurance Group. Now, this is actually my company. It's registered in Texas, and I do security consulting, but I also have a focus on consulting for cyber insurance for large providers. I have a property and casualty license. So we're going to use my company name as kind of our prototype, as our real-world scenario. Now, you are the Chief Information Security Officer. You're my CISO for this Brio Insurance Group. And you're the main executive lead on enterprise security. And you want to have that mindset as we go through these 19 courses of this CASP series. You're going to be overseeing the headquarters SOC, the Security Operations Center. That's one of your main duties. But also, you lead the team of underwriters and auditors and the incident response team for the cyber insurance division. So you're the CISO for Brio Insurance Group, and we're going to have this real-world mindset throughout this entire training. Now, right off the bat, we have to understand how dynamic and how changing the environment is out there. Managing risk is dynamic, it's challenging, it's very demanding. You've got new products to deal with. The Internet of Things, the IoT or IoE, Internet of Everything, as well as the commoditization of all different types of devices, has made it very difficult for CISOs like yourself to keep up. You've got new technologies. And technology is a cyclical and interactive, continuous process to deal with. For example, you have end users in your organization with new technology. Is this technology sanctioned by the endpoint protection solution? How does it affect your AUP, the acceptable use policy? Does the new technology or product open up channels that can evade next-generation firewalls or data loss prevention? And there may be new user activities. All new user initiatives must apply formal risk management. That may involve using visibility tools like UBA, user behavioral analysis, or machine learning solution or scripts. And of course, this dynamic, challenging environment means we need to update our user awareness and training programs on an ongoing basis. Bleeding edge technology and processes introduce unique risks to our enterprise. Oftentimes, the customers are the alpha testers and the beta testers with the rush to get products and services to market. It may be difficult to find expertise and technical support for new bleeding edge technology and new services, even from the vendor. There can be vendor confusion on licensing and pricing. Recently, I was looking for some open fair analysis software because I'm an open fair factor analysis of information risk practitioner. And there was a new product out there, and I was trying to talk to the salesperson about it, and I was just getting the runaround. I couldn't get any pricing, and basically I had to make a major commitment before they would even tell me what the annual license was. So as the CISO of Brio, you may run into these same types of situations where there's confusion with vendors on pricing and licensing on this brand new technology you're trying to acquire. If you're introducing bleeding edge technology, do you have a fallback strategy and a process for going back to the previous solution or scrapping it and trying some other vendor altogether? Remember, if you're going with a new business for a solution, most new businesses fail in the first 3 years. Also, it's often difficult for new businesses to get insurance policies, to get a BOP or liability insurance. So take that into consideration as well. That new company may not even be able to get a cyber insurance endorsement on their existing policy. We have to be able to deal with changes in strategy and business models. A lot of individuals who are starting out will transition from a DBA, for example, Michael Shannon doing business as Brio Insurance Group, moving to an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and maybe they'll go from an LLC to an S corporation or a C corporation. As the CISO of Brio, you need to have an understanding of these different types of business models. Also, you'll be expected to know this on the CASP exam. I'm not going to go into super detail, into super depth here. It's up to you to make sure that if you have to dig deeper in some of these topics, if you're just totally drawing a blank, take ownership, take responsibility, and go do some extra research on your own. So a joint venture is basically when two companies invest funds into creating a third company, a jointly owned company, creating what's called a new subsidiary. For example, Sony Ericsson. That's a joint venture between Sony and the Swedish company Ericsson. We also have strategic alliances. This is a legal agreement between two or more companies to share access to technology, trademarks, intellectual property, and assets. For example, Apple and IBM have a strategic alliance. A partnership is a legal arrangement where two or more people own a business together where the entire business is shared for the lifetime of that business. Now, you might think of a partnership as being kind of a smaller arrangement, like an LLC, but one of the most famous partnerships of all time is Warner Brothers, okay? The Warner Brothers founders, Sam, Jack, Albert, and Henry Warner, were pioneers in the film industry and basically introduced sound to movies, okay? So they created the Warner Brothers partnership. There's also mergers, which is an agreement or a deal to unite two existing companies into one new permanent organization. I've actually been a part of that myself throughout my career, and later on in this training, we're going to see that Brio is going to go through a merger, and we're going to look at some of the documentation that we're going to use as part of that process. In a merger, the acquiring and acquired companies join together to decide and execute a merger agreement between themselves. This can also be done among more than two companies. You want to make sure that you review all the subcontractor agreements. Remember, it's very likely that these existing companies are going to have existing contractor, subcontractor agreements, SLAs, and other types of agreements that we'll look at later. The opposite of a merger is a divestiture or a demerger, where you're kind of breaking up the company or separating it into different companies. Some of the key issues here that we'll have to think about, especially as a CISO, is cleaning up any access rules and rights and permissions, identity, data information. There's ways to perform this annulment. We can do it by brute force, or we can do it in an automated way. When you went through the merger, if you used automated processes, then the deprovisioning will also be automated. So that's something you want to think about. And of course, in a divestiture, we have data loss and data leakage risks, especially to intellectual property. Let's look at some security challenges to changing your outsourced solution, and we will be looking at cloud solutions and outsourcing in much greater detail later on in this live lessons. But one of the things about outsourcing is it's hard to react to new market conditions when you're changing an outsourced solution, let's say for your call center. Maybe at Brio, we're going to outsource our customer service. It could reduce your flexibility. Also, when you go to a new outsourced solution, let's say for your call center, you now have less knowledge than you had before of the internal IT, of the internal security and the privacy solutions that are implemented by the outsourced solution. It could slow down your platform development. Also, security controls are more difficult to deploy, especially because you don't really have control of the outsourced call center. For example, the administrative and managerial controls or physical controls. You may have no control over that whatsoever. And what if you're using more than a single outsourced vendor? Having multiple outsourced vendors, let's say a particular vendor to do all of your graphics, another for your customer service, and another for outbound calling, will be more problematic and more challenging from a security standpoint. Let me just say here that you want to have the mindset of you're a CISO at Brio Insurance Group, and I want to remind you that it's important to apply critical thinking and bring in all of your real-world experience to this exam. We'll be talking about cloud computing in much greater detail later on, but here we want to look at the security challenges to changing your cloud providers. That's what we're talking about here, okay? Associated security risks with changing models and changing strategies. So there's challenges to going from a private cloud to a hybrid cloud or to a public cloud. Do you need a CASP? Do you need a security broker for your software as a service solution to help you with access control and identity and encryption? Maybe you're using Workday or Salesforce or Microsoft Office 365 as a SaaS solution. Using a CASP or perhaps Palo Alto Network's Aperture solution may be a change that you have to make. Maybe there's new regulations, new mandates, new governance that have been put in place on your business sector that make it that you can only use a private cloud for your data. All these changes will involve understanding data ownership, classification issues for access control and identity. So it's critical that you have change and configuration management solutions. And changing a cloud service provider, let's say going from Google to Amazon Web Services, can be problematic for transfers. It's a major decision. And lastly, integration with other industries can raise challenges. For example, the integration between the healthcare industry and the financial industry, or manufacturing a product for a government contract or DoD. Okay, next I want to do a little short demonstration and take you in a web safari to look at some documentation that might help you, especially securing your interconnections with these different changes in business models and business strategies. Okay, I'm up here at NIST, nvd.nist.gov, and let me just say that as I go through these web safaris throughout this entire live lesson, it's very important that you document these places that I'm going to and maybe create a folder in your favorites in your web browser so that you have all of these sites that I'm going to as you prepare for this exam. There's going to be quite a bit of web safari activity as we take a look at a lot of resources on the internet. Here is NIST SP 800-53, revision number 4. And this is Security Controls and Assessment Procedures. This is for the federal government, but it talks about system interconnections. And so interconnections between different providers, cloud providers, ISPs, vendors, strategic partners, is a key security consideration when you're going to new products and new technologies and changing your business models and strategies. So down here it just talks about, in this documentation, how we authorize connections between systems to other information systems, how we document the interface characteristics, the security requirements, and what type of information are we communicating. And it also introduces the ISA, the Interconnection Security Agreement. Now, later on in Lesson 2, specifically 2.3, we're going to actually look at some specific documents because we're going to go through a scenario with Brio Insurance Group where we're going to create partnerships and we're going to create these agreements with imaginary companies. So we're going to actually see these documents in place. But this is a key agreement that you'll have as you deal with changing business models and business strategies. Another great resource that I found is at this law firm, and specifically Fenwick and West, and I want to show you this advanced issues in outsourcing agreements. I really want to recommend that you go up to the internet and you can just do a search for Fenwick and West outsourcing agreement. This has some really critical information, not just from a legal standpoint, but migrating your data processing operations with an outsourced solution, thinking about damages to the failure to perform the migration, performance standards and penalties. So this is some great information, and it's a downloadable PDF. So I want to recommend that to you as well. Then finally, I'll go and create some imaginary legal documents at realdealdocs.com. And you can go up here, by the way, and you can get a free 30-day trial and then go in here and create a bunch of prototypical documents. And so that's what I did. When we get to Lesson 2, Brio Insurance Group, I created several prototype documents for different scenarios, and I did it at this site. So I want to give you that, and you can get a free 30-day trial and create your documents and then just go cancel your free trial. This is our first demo, a web safari on some documentation for dealing with changing business models and strategies, with outsourcing, with cloud,